New economic and political belief systems. Changes as profound as the Industrial Revolution triggered political ferment and ideological conflict. So many wars and revolutions took place during those years that we cannot neatly separate out the consequences of industrialization from the rest. But it is clear that the undermining social traditions and causing a growing gap between rich and poor. The Industrial Revolution strengthened the ideas of laissez-faire and socialism and sparked workers' protests. Laissez-faire and its critics. Laissez-faire, the idea that government should refrain from interfering in economic affairs. The classic exposition of laissez-faire principles in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, 1776. Adam Smith and laissez-faire. The most celebrated exponent of laissez-faire, let them do, was Adam Smith, 1723 to 1790, a Scottish economist. In The Wealth of Nations, 1776, Smith argued that if individuals were allowed to seek personal gain, the effect, as though guided by an invisible hand, would be to increase the general welfare. The government should refrain from interfering in business except to protect private property. It should even allow duty-free trade with foreign countries. By advocating free market capitalism, Smith was challenging the prevailing economic doctrine, mercantilism, which argued that governments should regulate trade in order to maximize their hoard of precious metals. Chapter 18. Mercantilism. European government policies of the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries designed to promote overseas trade between a country and its colonies and accumulate precious metals by requiring colonies to trade only with their motherland country. The British system was defined by the Navigation Acts, the French systems by laws known as the exclusif. Persuaded by Adam Smith's arguments, governments after 1815 dismantled many of their regulations. Britain even lowered its import duties. Nonetheless, it was obvious that the industrialization was causing widespread misery. Two other thinkers, Thomas Malthus, 1766 to 1834, and David Ricardo, 1772 to 1832, attempted to explain the poverty they saw without challenging the basic premises of laissez-faire. The cause of the workers' plight, they said, was the population boom, which outstripped the food supply and led to failing wages. The workers' poverty, they claimed, was as much a result of natural law as the wealth of successful businessmen, and the only way the working class could avoid mass famine was to delay marriage and practice self-restraint and sexual abstinence. Business people in Britain eagerly adopted laissez-faire ideas that justified their activities and kept the government at bay. But not everyone accepted the grim conclusions of the dismal science. As the economics was then known, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham, 1748 to 1832, believed that it was possible to maximize the greatest happiness of the greatest number, German, if, if only Parliament would study the social problems of the day and pass appropriate legislation. The German economist Friedrich List, 1789 to 1846, rejected laissez-faire and free trade as a British trick to make the rest of the world like the Hindus, its serfs, in all industrial and commercial relations. To protect their infant industries from British competition, he argued, the German list's ideas were as influential as those of Smith and Ricardo and led in 1834 to the formation of the Zollverein, a customs union of most of the German states. Positivism. French social thinkers, moved by sincere concern for the poor, offered a radically new vision of just civilization. Positivism, a philosophy developed by a French Count of Saint-Simon. Positivism believed that social and economic problems could be solved by the application of the scientific method, leading to continuous progress. Their ideas became popular in France and Latin America in the 19th century. Espousing a philosophy called positivism. The Count of Saint-Simon, 1760 to 1825, and his disciple Auguste Comte, 1798 to 1857, argued that the scientific method could solve social as well as technical problems. They recommended that the poor, guided by scientists and artists from workers' communities under the protection of benevolent business leaders. These ideas attracted the enthusiastic supports of bankers and entrepreneurs for whom positivism provided a rationale for investing in railroads, canals, and other symbols of modernity. Protests and reforms. Workers benefited little from the ideas of the middle class philosophers. Instead, they resisted the harsh working conditions in their own ways. Periodically, they rioted or went on strike, especially when food prices were high or when downturns in the business cycle left many unemployed. In some places, craftsmen broke into factories and destroyed the machines that threatened their livelihood. Such acts of resistance did nothing to change the nature of industrial work. Workers' organizations. Gradually, workers organized to demand the universal male suffrage and shorter workdays. In 1834, Robert Owen founded the Grand International Consolidated Trade Union to lobby for an 8-hour workday. It quickly gained 500,000 members but collapsed a few months later in the face of government prosecution. A new movement called Chartism arose soon thereafter, led by William Lovett and Ferguson O'Connor, that appealed to miners and industrial workers. It demanded universal male suffrage, the secret ballot, salaries for members of parliament, and annual elections. It gathered 1.3 million signatures on a petition, but parliament rejected it. Chartism collapsed in 1848, but it left a legacy of labor organization. Eventually, mass movements persuaded the British Parliament to investigate conditions in factories and mines. The Factory Act of 1833 prohibited the employment of children younger than 9 in textile mills. It also limited the working hours of children between ages of 9 and 13 to 8 hours a day and of 14 to 18 years old to 12 hours. Reforms. The Mines Act of 1842 prohibited the employment of women and boys under age 10 underground. Most important was the struggle of the Corn Laws, tariffs on imported grain. Their repeal in 1846, in the name of free trade, was designed to lower the cost of food for workers and allow employers to pay lower wages. The repeal represented a victory for the rising class of manufacturers over the conservative landowners who had long dominated politics and whose harvest faced competition from cheaper imported food. The British learned to seek reform through accommodation. On the European continent, the revolutions of 1848 revealed widespread discontent with repressive governments but failed to soften the hardships of industrialization. See Chapter 26.